Welcome back to the podcast de Philippe, everyone. Today we're going deep into the world of AI and how it's playing a role in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, especially, 3 years into this conflict.
So we're going to explore how Ukraine is using AI to really kind of boost its military capabilities,
Right.
even when facing sanctions that are limiting its access to vital resources and equipment.
Absolutely. And I think for the listeners, it might be really surprising to see just how much of an impact AI is having on modern warfare.
So get ready for some pretty eye-opening examples and insights.
Definitely.
And by the way, don't forget to help us hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube today.
Yeah, we could really use the support.
All right, so let's dive in. One of the things that's really fascinating to me is how AI is helping Ukraine make faster and more informed decisions on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's a key aspect of this whole thing.
Can you kind of explain that a bit more for our listeners? Like, what does that actually mean?
Sure. So basically, every military action, right, involves a cycle of observing the situation, figuring out what's happening, deciding what to do, and then actually taking action.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is often referred to as the OD loop, ODA.
The ODA loop.
Observe, Orient, Decide Act. And what AI systems are doing is they're essentially speeding up this cycle for Ukraine.
So they're able to react much quicker than their opponent.
Exactly. They're getting inside that adversary's decision-making loop, which is a huge advantage.
It's got to be a huge advantage. I mean, if you can act faster and respond faster to what your opponent is doing,
you're already ahead of the game.
yeah, that's incredible. And we're seeing this play out in a number of ways, right?
Absolutely. One really striking example is the Skykit system,
Okay, I've heard a little bit about this.
which uses AI to analyze satellite imagery, and then it actually proposes attack plans based on that analysis.
So instead of having human analysts poring over these images for hours trying to figure out what's going on,
Right, it's taking so much time.
this AI is doing it in just a fraction of the time.
Yeah, and this is a game changer because it allows Ukraine to respond to threats much more rapidly and efficiently.
And how accurate are these AI systems? I mean, we hear a lot about, the potential for mistakes or biases, but how are they actually performing in real-world situations?
Well, the reports are indicating that AI-powered drones, for instance, are achieving hit rates of 70 to 80%.
Wow.
Which is significantly higher than manually piloted drones.
That's incredible. That kind of accuracy is really impressive.
But of course, it does raise questions about collateral damage and how that's being mitigated.
Right, because even with that high level of accuracy, there's still a chance of, unintended consequences.
Absolutely. That's a critical question, and unfortunately one that we don't have all the answers to yet.
Yeah, it's still a developing field.
But the fact that these systems are being developed and deployed is a clear indication of how seriously nations are taking the role of AI in warfare.
It's clearly the future in many ways.
Yeah, it's rapidly evolving, and Ukraine seems to be at the forefront of utilizing these technologies.
Now, we've also got this other program, the Swarmer program.
Yeah, this one's pretty fascinating.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So Swarmer is a Ukrainian startup that's developing swarms of combat robots that are equipped with AI.
Wow, this sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
I know, right? But it's happening right now.
It's real.
Essentially, these robots can coordinate attacks and overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers.
So it's not about individual robots. It's about the collective power of the swarm.
Right. It's a completely different approach to warfare than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's really pushing the boundaries of AI and robotics.
And it highlights how this conflict is accelerating the development of these cutting-edge technologies.
So we're seeing things happening now that we might not have expected for another 5 or 10 years.
Exactly. The pace of innovation is incredible.
And now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the impact of U.S. sanctions on Ukraine's access to intelligence and military equipment.
Yeah, this is a critical aspect of the conflict.
This has got to be posing some pretty serious challenges for them, right?
Absolutely. The suspension of intelligence sharing in particular has really limited Ukraine's ability to anticipate Russian movements and prepare for attacks.
So without that early warning system,
They're flying blind in many ways.
it makes it much harder to protect civilians and to really get ready for what's coming.
Exactly. And we're seeing reports that Ukraine is struggling to maintain its stockpile of essential weapon systems like artillery ammunition and Patriot missile defense systems because of these sanctions.
And that intelligence sharing halt, it's got to be a huge blow. I mean, how much of an impact is it really having on the ground? Like, what are we seeing in terms of the actual effects?
Well, it's hard to say for certain, but it's definitely making things more difficult for them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's got to be a huge setback. I mean, they were really relying on that intelligence sharing.
They were, but it's really interesting to see how they're adapting and overcoming these obstacles.
So even with these limitations, they're finding ways to push forward.
Yeah, they're not backing down at all. In fact, they're focusing on developing their own AI and defense technologies.
So they're trying to become more self-reliant and less dependent on that external support.
Exactly. They're turning this challenge into an opportunity.
That's impressive. I mean, that takes a lot of resilience and determination.
It does, and they're making some real progress in a few key areas.
Like what specifically? Where are we seeing some of these advancements?
Well, one area is autonomous drones.
Okay, so taking that drone technology to the next level.
They're investing heavily in developing even more advanced systems, including drone swarms that are controlled by AI algorithms.
So instead of just individual drones operating independently,
You have these swarms that can coordinate attacks and overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers.
now what makes these drone swarms so effective? I mean, what is it about that approach that gives them an advantage?
Well, for one thing, they can perform a wide range of tasks, from reconnaissance and surveillance to even offensive operations.
So they're pretty versatile.
And because they're relatively inexpensive to produce, they offer a cost-effective way to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but also the economics of it.
Exactly. It's about finding smart and efficient ways to leverage AI.
Now, besides the drones, what other innovative solutions are they exploring?
They're also looking at AI applications for analyzing open source intelligence,
Open source intelligence.
or OSINT as it's often called.
Okay.
This involves gathering information from publicly available sources like social media news reports, things like that.
So instead of relying solely on traditional intelligence gathering, they're harnessing the power of all this information that's already out there.
Exactly. And AI is being used to sift through massive amounts of data to identify potential targets or to gather crucial intel.
So it's like a force multiplier for their intelligence efforts.
Right. It allows them to supplement their limited resources and to really stay ahead of the curve.
It's fascinating to see how they're adapting and innovating in the face of these challenges.
It really is, and it all ties back to that concept of the O to V loop that we talked about earlier.
Right. The faster they can gather and process information, the quicker they can make decisions and act.
And that gives them an edge on the battlefield.
Absolutely. But stepping back from the specifics of the Ukrainian conflict,
Yeah, taking a broader view.
this growing use of AI raises some pretty big questions about the future of warfare in general.
It does. What we're seeing in Ukraine is really just a glimpse into a future where AI plays an increasingly central role in armed conflicts.
And that brings up a whole host of ethical concerns.
Oh, absolutely, especially as these systems become more sophisticated and autonomous.
Right, because the more we rely on AI to make decisions, the more we need to think about the potential consequences.
Exactly. One of the biggest concerns is unintended consequences. What happens if an AI system makes a decision that deviates from its programming or misinterprets a situation?
That's a scary thought, especially when we're talking about life or death situations.
And then there's the question of accountability. Who's responsible when an AI-powered system makes a mistake?
Is it the developer, the operator, the military commander?
It's a legal and ethical minefield that we're only beginning to navigate.
It's definitely uncharted territory, but these are questions that we need to be asking now.
We can't afford to wait until it's too late.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So while the focus right now is on Ukraine,
Right.
this is really a global issue.
Absolutely. It has implications for everyone.
And the lessons learned here will shape how other nations approach AI integration in their own military strategies.
I think that's a really important point. What's happening in Ukraine is a testing ground for AI in warfare.
And those lessons, both the technological advancements and the ethical considerations,
Right, the whole package.
will have a ripple effect far beyond this particular conflict.
Absolutely. It's going to influence how we think about warfare for decades to come. It really has a lot of ripple effects. And I think for me, the thing that really stands out is the incredible adaptability and innovation that we're seeing from Ukraine.
It really is remarkable. Even in the face of these obstacles, facing a technologically superior adversary and dealing with these sanctions, they're still finding ways to not just level the playing field, but to really push the boundaries of what's possible with AI.
I think that's a great point. Turning this challenge into an opportunity.
Yeah.
And this commitment to developing their own AI and defense technologies, it's a testament to their resilience. And I think it's going to have ripple effects far beyond this conflict.
So you're saying what's happening in Ukraine is almost like a testing ground for AI in warfare.
I think it is, and the lessons learned here, both in terms of the technological advancements and the ethical considerations, are going to inform how other nations approach AI integration in their military strategies.
So we're kind of witnessing a pivotal moment in military history.
Yeah, I believe we are, and it really underscores the urgent need for international dialogue and cooperation.
Right, because we don't want to just sleepwalk into an AI arms race without really thinking about the consequences.
Exactly. Nations need to come together to establish clear norms and guidelines for the responsible use of AI in warfare.
And it's a complex issue with really high stakes. And it's easy to get caught up in, the excitement of the technology
Advancements.
without really grappling with those ethical implications.
It's a crucial balance to strike, and I think this dialogue needs to involve not just military leaders and policymakers, but also ethicists, technologists, representatives from civil society.
So a much broader conversation.
It has to be a conversation on a global scale.
And ultimately, the goal should be to harness the power of AI in a way that promotes global security and stability.
Not exacerbates conflict. That's the key.
Right. We want to make sure that technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly.
That's a principle that we really need to keep in mind as we navigate this uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well, on that thought-provoking note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of AI in Ukraine.
It's been a really fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed it.
I did too, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us. We hope this deep dive provided you with some valuable insights and maybe spurred some critical thinking about the evolving role of AI in warfare. And don't forget to help us reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube today. We really appreciate your support. Until next time, this has been Le Podcast de Philippe.